for the resolution is Graham Campbell. So welcome to Graham.
Thanks.
Conference. Thank you, convener. I'm going to begin by saying the following. Black Lives Matter. And in Scotland, that statement was made very firmly when over 30,000 people were on the streets. We in the SNP BAME network put an amendment to this, which you'll see. It's the line that says that Black Lives Matter cannot remain a platitude. It's got to mean that we have results that stem from it. Our people on the streets would accept nothing less. They made the link between George Floyd and indeed our own cases here in the UK, particularly the Sheku Bayo case, which our government has made sure there's an inquiry about. 70 million people, though, however, despite the Black Lives Matter movement internationally in the States and the brilliant way in which African Americans were mobilized to vote so that Biden won, we still had 70 million people voting for Trump. We live in an age with online mainstreamed racism. So what were the three main asks that demonstrators had of us? There were three of them. They were calling for decolonization of the curriculum in recognition of the slavery legacy. That means that the Scottish education system needs to be tackling institutionalized discrimination, whether it's in teacher employment, as Corcab Stewart spoke about yesterday, whether it's in the actual curriculum taught by primary and secondary level teachers. We need a specialist unit that coordinates that legacy across the board. We also talked about removing institutional barriers to public life and employment. We need to lift the approach that we've had so far, which tends to tick boxes but doesn't actually set targets for organisations to achieve results. Now, I'm proud that as a Glasgow City Councillor, I moved a motion which did exactly that, gave us an aspirational target to achieve a much higher representation of black employees amongst our staff. We currently have about 2%. We are aiming to get to 6% by the end of our term here. Until public bodies are held accountable for their targets to achieve a quality of outcome, we will not really be taken seriously on this question of race equality. Now, I've been asked by BAME health workers from the NHS, heroes and sheroes of the front line of COVID, to say this. We want to see public bodies reporting back every 6 months to achieve against measured targets. And we want the 150 public bodies who have been asked by STUC's Break the Race Ceiling campaign to publish their data and to make sure it's robust. Finally, the big ask from the demos was to tackle racist bullying in schools. And all of us will have had casework about this. In the call that we made in June to over 100 members of the BAME community, we saw that parent after parents had experience of racist bullying in schools not being properly tackled. And we need to be supporting the Tackling Racist Bullying Campaign's principles, 5 principles, which are a great approach to how to solve that problem, taking in parents, teachers, and pupils. So I'm hopeful that you will pass this resolution, but bear in mind that there's more to it than what is on the page. Finally, colleagues, I want to say I'm proudly embraced the word woke, which has been a phrase used by many of those online and sometimes in person to argue that equalities and arguing for it is some kind of a diversion from the struggle for independence. Well, let me tell you something. The majority of people in Scotland are women, disabled people, LGBTQI, including trans, and they are younger, they are older, and they are BAME. That is the majority. If we want to win independence, we have to win a majority. Black Lives Matter was started by black LGBT women. The Stonewall riots, which gave rise to the gay liberation movement, was started by black drag queens who have been oppressed.
I need to stop you because the time is up.
Either you're for the oppressed or you're...
Sorry to exclude, but I'm afraid your time is up now.
Thank you, Kirsten and conference. Good morning, and I hope you're all getting used to hopping in and out of the blather room as I have done. This is a massive resolution, which is obviously way too much to speak about in 3 minutes, 50 seconds. But what I can say is to refer to sections of the resolution that talk about health inequalities, particularly lines 12 and 13, where we talk about the differential impact of health inequality and how dealing with the COVID crisis affects us. I mean, I don't need to tell you, you'll know already that Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities are more susceptible to this disease because of the pre-existing reality of the pandemic of racism and structural inequality. That COVID has come on top of that to see a massively higher death rate amongst BAME healthcare workers. And we know, of course, that with, I think, of the 200 or so BAME healthcare workers who've died of the virus during the emergency, 2/3 of them have been from BAME communities, which tells you something, that BAME workers, BAME staff are more likely to be at the front line of the response, therefore more likely to be in the danger. So I think we need to be taking some measures to protect. And that means taking cognizance of how we deploy our staff when we're tackling this crisis, which undoubtedly will go on for quite a few months before we get a vaccine widely available. I also want to flag up the point about zero COVID, having a zero COVID elimination strategy with a proper fit-for-purpose testing and tracing system. We're doing our best as a government to do that, but we need to go further in making sure we have one. I also want to take the last 2 minutes to talk about the other subject that's here. If you look at lines 50 to 53, 54, we're talking about the work of Glasgow University and reparative justice, which is mentioned. And you'll know that just this week, Glasgow University got awarded the University of the Year for its work on reparative justice around the slavery legacy. And that's something I've worked very closely on. We're following very closely as a city council in launching our own an SNP council in Glasgow, the first civil authority properly to deal with this in Glasgow, following in the university's footsteps in making a public consultation around street names, science, and slavery legacy, and decolonising the curriculum. The future Scotland's going to need to tackle and be honest and head on with that legacy. By doing so, you see what change you can make. You can see what Glasgow University has been done. I look forward to the time when Glasgow City Council and the country and Scotland as a country, having fessed up to that past, is able to connect the racism of yesterday and the racism of today. This resolution is very important in making that point as official party policy. So, and I'm very honoured and pleased that it's there as a result of the work of the BAME Network and others who've supported that being in the report. So I want to thank colleagues for that. I commend this resolution to the House and have a good rest of conference.